Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Thank you for joining us. Merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. My name is Sébastien Tremblay and I will be today's moderator. Je m'appelle Sébastien Tremblay et je serai le modérateur de ce point de presse. Before I introduce our first speaker, a quick reminder to those joining virtually to place yourself on mute until I invite you to ask your question. If for some reason we lose you during the call, please try joining again or contact Media Relations to submit your question. After we hear from the panelists, we will take questions from the media. We will begin now with remarks by His Worship, Jim Watson, Mayor of the City of Ottawa.
Thank you for that forced applause. I appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue à OC Transpo. Welcome to OC Transpo Saint Laurent Garage, and I'm very pleased to welcome you, as well as those watching on the city's YouTube channel, for this very exciting and historic announcement here in our beautiful city. Bienvenue à cette annonce historique pour l'environnement et le transport en commun. My thanks to the Honourable Catherine McKenna, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities and Member of Parliament for Ottawa Centre, Aaron Corey, Chief Executive Officer of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Also like to recognize and thank my colleagues, Councillor Alan Hubley, Chair of the City's Transit Commission, le Vice-Président de la Commission de Transport Commun, Jean Cloutier, and John Manconi, General Manager of Transportation Services Development. I'd now like to invite the Honourable Catherine McKenna to come forward and make this very exciting announcement for the people of Ottawa. Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Watson. It's great to be here. As you'll see, my hair is not green anymore, but great to see everyone who's stepped up to help support CHEO. It's a reminder of what an amazing community we live in. I also want to recognize that I'm here with my good friend Aaron Corey, who's CEO of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. We've revamped the bank, and the bank is really focused on how do they make investments make a real difference in the lives of Canadians, as you will see today. Councillor Alan Hubley, Chair of the Transit Commission, Councillor Jean Cloutier, going with the green theme. I like both of that from both of you, as well as John Manconi. And John, thank you for your service to your community. I know that you'll be stepping down in September, so hopefully much needed retirement or break for a while. I want to recognize that we're making this announcement on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. I think that the remains of 215 children at the former residential school in Kamloops is a reminder of how much work we still need to do together on reconciliation. I also want to acknowledge that we're making this announcement on the border of two ridings represented by my colleagues David McGuinty from Ottawa South and Mona Fortier from Ottawa Vanier, also the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity and the Associate Finance Minister. They're not able to be here today, but they're amazing champions for Ottawa. And of course, we have a great team in Ottawa: Anita Vandenbeld, Ottawa West Nepean, Chandra Arya Nepean, Karen McCrimmon, Canada Carleton, and Marie-France Lalonde from Orléans. Alors, j'ai pas besoin de vous dire combien c'était difficile l'année. C'est plus qu'une année qu'on est dans la pire crise sanitaire de certainement ma vie, mais aussi la pire crise économique. I don't have to tell everyone what a challenging year we've had. It's been very hard in terms of the pandemic, both the health crisis, but of course the economic crisis. We're in a COVID recession, and we need to be focused on how do we create 1 million jobs, as we've committed to, and how do we build back better. I think we're making really good progress. And a shout out to the mayor, to Vera Etches and Ottawa Public Health for all of the work that they've done. It's great to see vaccines in arms, and our government will continue to support Canadians, including residents, businesses, municipalities like Ottawa through the pandemic. 80 cents of every dollar has been invested by the federal government. We will always have your back. My focus as Minister of Infrastructure and Communities has been in accelerating job-creating projects. We've invested in 3,100 projects since the pandemic started. That's investments of $4.3 billion from coast to coast to coast. And those have been investments that made a huge difference here in Ottawa. Just recently, that we announced under the COVID-19 stream, investments in air ventilation for local schools. I don't have to tell folks out there, parents, especially moms, how important it is that we get our kids back in school safely. And ventilation, improved ventilation is certainly part of that, as well as improved air ventilation in long-term care homes. We've seen the devastating impact of the pandemic on our seniors, and we need to be doing better. But as I always say, we will get through this pandemic, but we're still going to have another crisis. This crisis is called climate change. That we need to take the same approach that we've taken to the pandemic. We need to be focused on science. We need to listen to scientists. We need to all work together, municipalities working with the private sector, working with the federal government, of course. And we need to be laser-like focused on the solutions we know that already exist. We're going to be talking about one of them today, electric buses. Transportation represents 20% of our emissions here in Canada, close to a quarter of our emissions, in fact, and we know that we can do better. When I look at today's announcement, it's been a real evolution. It was, I think, Mayor Watson, I think it was in December 2020 that we went from 0 to an announcement of 4 electric buses right here in Ottawa. That was a big step. And I think that there was some trepidation by some. Will we be able to do more? Because, of course, we have a large population in a vast area. But the good news is the technology around electric buses has changed so much. With the Prime Minister, I announced that we were going to bet big on electric buses. That we announced as part of a $15 billion in new funding for permanent public transit infrastructure projects over the next 8 years, that we would be investing $2.75 billion in zero-emission buses and a lot of other projects to help electrify Canada's public transit. So first ever zero-emission bus fund, first ever active transportation fund so we can fund more cycling and walking paths, first ever rural transit fund. When you look at our commitment, it's ambitious. Putting 5,000 zero-emission public transit and school buses on the Canadian roads over the next 5 years. And what I love about it is we've seen communities step up. That we know that we need to make sure that every taxpayer dollar achieves multiple outcomes, and we have an opportunity to bring in the private sector. That's why today's announcement is so great. That we're announcing that working with the Canada Infrastructure Bank, working with the City of Ottawa will go from 4 electric buses to electrifying its entire fleet. That is incredible ambition, and I think that this is the first city in the country to do this. I couldn't be prouder, Mayor Watson, that you've decided with council, with your transit folks, that this is what the future looks like. And the great thing is that we have the Canada Infrastructure Bank to help make it happen so that we bring in more dollars, so we can get more zero-emission buses built. I know that Aaron Corey will talk about that a bit more. Alors moi, je suis très heureuse d'annoncer qu'aujourd'hui, la Ville d'Ottawa va aller de 4 autobus zéro émission, 4 autobus électriques pour électrifier tout le fleet d'autobus. Alors ça, c'est ambition. Un grand merci à le maire, un grand merci au Conseil d'Ottawa, parce que vous avez ambition. C'est la première ville, je pense, au Canada qui dit maintenant, on va électrifier tout notre fleet. And let's talk about why this has multiple benefits. As I say, I'm a mom. Every taxpayer dollar has to achieve different outcomes. So what are we doing here? We're creating immediate jobs. That these buses are a huge opportunity for jobs. Guess where the best companies in the world are that make electric buses? They are right here in Canada. That's Nova Bus et Lyon Electric in Quebec. That's New Flyer buses out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. And we have other leading bus companies in British Columbia. This is a huge job opportunity. We have committed to 1 million jobs in Canada, and we've committed to growing our economy. 2, we need to build more inclusive communities. Who takes public transit? People who don't have other options. That's more likely to be single mothers, to be kids and university students getting to schools. That's new immigrants. But we want everyone to be taking electric buses. And 80% of Ottawans will live within 5 kilometers of the LRT. So this is also, how do we get people on electrified transit across the board? And active transit is going to play a huge role. As I said, we're going to get out of the pandemic, but we need to tackle climate change. And I've said that, I've put it out there, that Ottawa needs to be the greenest capital in the world. Going completely electric with our bus fleet is just part of this narrative of all the things that we have done. From the net zero super library to active transportation, cycling paths, the Flora footbridge, and stay tuned. I think there's going to be another great announcement soon. Investments in trails like the Rideau Winter Trail to get more people outside in active and clean ways. We can be the greenest capital in the world. We need to be ambitious, and I'm just so proud to be the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, but also the Member of Parliament for Ottawa Centre, where we have ambition and we recognize the huge opportunity to move forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much, Minister McKenna. That is great news for OC Transpo customers, for our staff here, as well as for the citizens of the nation's capital. With the support of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank and Infrastructure Canada, we're embarking on one of the largest ever municipal investments in zero-emission transit in Canadian history. This announcement illustrates how important it is for all levels of government to work together to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the country. Cet investissement historique a rendu possible grâce à la collaboration entre les deux paliers, les autres gouvernements comme le gouvernement du Canada. This collaboration and funding will help cities like ours transition to more sustainable transit fleets, and that helps us meet our own objectives in our climate change master plan. As part of this project, City Council will be asked to approve the agreement with the Canada Infrastructure Bank and Hydro Ottawa and give staff the mandate to seek funding from Infrastructure Canada to make an historic investment in electric buses between now and 2027. If approved by the Transit Commission on June 16th and then by City Council on June 23rd, this investment will ultimately see 450 electric buses phased into operation by 2027, putting us well on track to convert the entire bus fleet by 2036. Thanks to the CIB's financing of the high upfront costs associated with purchasing electric buses, we're able to make this sound environmental choice today while paying back the difference using long-term savings. This means that transition to zero-emission buses will be done within the current long-range financial plan for transit. Cette transition vers les autobus électriques est abordable et bon pour l'environnement et pour nos communautés. The city will contribute what would normally be spent on a diesel bus, while the CIB will provide the money to cover the extra costs of the battery electric bus. In addition, OC Transpo will also look for support from Infrastructure Canada, which announced earlier this year as part of the Permanent Transit Fund, $2.75 billion in grant funding would be made available over the next 5 years for fleet conversion. This grant would help cover the implementation costs of transitioning OC Transpo's fleet. It's programs like these that allow municipalities to embrace new technologies to meet climate change goals for a greener Canada. And I want to sincerely thank Minister McKenna, who has been the champion and the leader on this front for many, many years. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre. I also want to talk a little bit about the type of zero-emission buses we'll be pursuing. After careful consideration and the great work that John Manconi and his team have done, of all options and uses across North America, battery electric buses currently present the best way forward to electrify OC Transpo's bus fleets between 2022 and 2027. Battery electric buses are currently the most widely used zero-emission technology in the transit industry, and they're in use in other Canadian cities like Montreal, Toronto, Edmonton, and Winnipeg. Also encouraging is that OC Transpo estimates that the cost to maintain a 40-foot battery electric bus will be roughly 35% lower than the cost to maintain a diesel bus. Not only is this good for the city's long-term finances, but moving from diesel to electric is also fundamental to us meeting our GHG reduction targets. We're rolling out our first 4 battery electric buses on Ottawa streets this fall, and those buses will be charged and maintained right here at the Saint Laurent Garage. With each one of these electric buses helping us save 35,000 liters of fuel every year, I know that switching to battery electric is one of the most impactful actions we can take to meet Ottawa's goal of reducing by 100% GHGs emitted by city operations by 2040. Ces autobus électriques nous aident à épargner beaucoup d'essence et de l'argent. And with the gradual phase-out of diesel buses as they reach the end of their life, OC Transpo could achieve a fully zero-emission bus fleet by 2036. In the short term, and thanks to these partner agreements, OC Transpo is recommending purchasing 74 40-foot battery electric buses and the required charging infrastructure as part of the city's 2020 capital budget next year. These new buses will enter into service in 2023, joining the 4 electric buses that will be in service this fall. I look forward to future visits here to the Saint Laurent Garage as the facility is transitioned to serve this expanding fleet of zero-emission buses. And I want to also thank Minister McKenna and our federal government partners for their support and helping us do our part in the fight against climate change. I also want to thank Councillor Hubley, the chair of OC Transpo, Vice Chair Cloutier, who arrived on his bicycle, thank you, Jean, and John Manconi and his entire team for putting this great proposal together. You have all played a key role in advancing our transition to electric buses and securing a cleaner environment for our community for generations to come, and I thank you sincerely for that. Merci à vous tous pour vos efforts continués pour rendre notre communauté plus verte et plus durable. It's now my pleasure to invite Aaron Corey, a newly appointed CEO of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, to say a few words. Aaron.
Thanks, Mayor Watson, very much. Thanks, councillors, and Minister McKenna, great to see you in person again. C'est un vrai plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. C'est ma premier événement comme le PDG de la BIC face en face. Alors, it's a milestone for me, not only for the great announcement we're making today, but it feels great to be out of the basement and off of Zoom. So nice to be with all of you. I only want to make a few comments in addition to the words of the Mayor and Minister McKenna. The CIB was created with this idea that we can get more infrastructure built to meet the needs of Canadians if we think innovatively and if we develop new forms of partnerships and new forms of financing alternatives to get more built more quickly. And this announcement is a great example of that. So first, the minister spoke a little bit about this idea of outcomes. And infrastructure is always much more than the things we're building or buying in the case of buses. It's about what those deliver. And the minister spoke very eloquently about this. When the CIB looks at an investment, that's how we think about it. We think about the amount of Canadian money, taxpayer money we're putting to work and what that's buying. And in the case of a project like this, the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, the elimination of diesel fuel, the elimination of particulate from our air, having quieter, safer buses on our streets, all of those outcomes factor into an investment like this. Second, for every investment we make, we're looking for things like the buses, as the mayor so well explained, that deliver long-term savings. Many forms of infrastructure are true investments. They aren't costs, they're investments. Buses like this, over the long term, deliver savings to municipalities. And so what the CIB can do is act as a bridge that shares in risk, that shares in the upfront cost, and over the long term we can use savings to pay for the new infrastructure we need. This is true in zero-emission buses, where today we're pleased to announce our investment of up to $400 million towards this next phase of 450 buses for the city. It's equally true if you think of investment in energy efficiency in buildings or many forms of green and renewable power. In each of those cases, there is a long-term economic story to tell, and what the CIB can do is be the bridge to get there. Third, a deal like this never comes together without incredible partnership. And municipalities are a key partner of ours in all of the CIB's investment efforts. Of course, most infrastructure is owned locally. It's not owned by the federal government, it's owned by provinces and by municipalities. So our job in many ways is to partner with municipalities. Ottawa's been an incredible partner, and John, you and your team have been fantastic. Mayor, you and your staff, thank you very much for being such collaborative partners along the way. That's how we make investments like this together. And I look forward to many more like this. We're talking to municipalities across the country. I had the pleasure last week of being at the Big City Mayor's Caucus and talking a little bit about projects just like this one and how we can together with municipalities make these types of investments in our transportation, in our buildings, and in our energy systems that can deliver long-term payback and that can close the infrastructure gap. So I'm really pleased to be here. I think this is the first of many announcements like this with the City of Ottawa and with municipalities across the country. So I'm really pleased to get to do it here with you today. Thank you very much. Mayor Watson, back to you.
All right, so I think Sebastian is going to take over the question and answer period. On va, les membres du média, on avait des questions pour les porte-parole ici.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Watson. I will now invite each agency to ask their question. You may ask one question with one follow-up. Par ordre alphabétique, j'invite maintenant chaque organisme à poser une question et une question de suivi. We'll now start with, nous allons commencer avec Darren Major at CBC. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, awesome. Yes, my question is for Mayor Watson. Just how will this change the fleet as a whole? There's 944 buses, so 450 by 2027 will make up a good chunk of the fleet. But how many are low emission or zero emission as it stands?
Well, right now we have 4 buses on order that will start this fall, electric battery buses. And the first phase of buses coming in will be 74 40-foot electric buses. And then ultimately we'll head up to 450 zero-emission buses by 2027. So the ultimate goal is to have 100% of our fleet fully electric bus by 2040. Okay.
And your follow-up?
No, that's good for me. I'm done.
Perfect. Thank you.
Oui, certainement. On commence avec 4 bus électriques cette année, dans quelques mois. Et la prochaine étape est d'acheter 74 bus électriques entre ici et l'année 2023 et 100% des autobus par l'année 2040. Alors ça, c'est le plus ambitieux projet dans le pays, comme Mme McKenna a dit, et nous sommes très fiers de continuer cette réputation comme une ville vraiment verte. Merci.
We will now go to Alex Gooch with City News.
Hello, my question is for Mayor Watson. With the current state of OC Transpo, given the pandemic with the low ridership, how do you feel like this announcement will bring the transit system into the future, more or less?
Well, Alex, thank you for the question. Ultimately, it's good on a couple of fronts, as both Aaron and Catherine mentioned. It's good for the environment. We will be probably the first city to have 100% of its fleet electrified. That's something we can be very proud of. It's good for the economy, obviously creating jobs. And it's also good for the pocketbooks of taxpayers because the operating costs are significantly lower. As you know, it takes about 35,000 gallons of diesel fuel for every bus, so that's a significant cost savings for the taxpayers. And ultimately, I feel very confident that the ridership will continue to go up. We'll start to see more of the economy opening up hopefully by next week in phase 1 under the provincial rules. And as we continue to get more doses in people's arms, we end up with more people wanting to come back to work, able to come back to work, and that will see increased ridership, particularly amongst students when the schools start back up again in September. Thank you.
Thank you. That's my only question today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now go to Craig Lord with Global Ottawa.
Hi there. Just hoping you can explain what the charging infrastructure will look like. Is it really just going to be at the garages there, or should we expect to see charging stations at stations like County's Pasture or any other transit stations along the transit routes?
Thank you. So it's John Manconi, by the way. So for the 40-foot buses, the standard size buses, it's infrastructure here at the garage, so they charge at the end of the day, overnight, or in between runs. And then long-term, because we have a mixed fleet, we have big articulated buses and double-deckers, depending on the technology change. But as Minister McKenna said, things are changing very rapidly on battery lives and recharging capabilities. For now, we do not need any charging out in the field. We'll see how things evolve with the transition of the fleet to the larger buses. But again, the battery technology is changing very, very rapidly, literally month by month. So for this first phase, it'll be all here at the Saint Laurent garage.
I think my next question is probably for John as well, so maybe you can stay up there. Sorry about that. So I was wondering what happens to if we do end up phasing out even half the current OC Transpo diesel fleet. What is the plan for those buses going forward? Are they going to be sold or repurposed somewhere else? What's the plan for the current fleet?
So what's great about this historic deal, when you add it all up together, you know, for the 450 buses, it's $1 billion invested from our partners, Infrastructure Canada and CIB and the city, without changing our baseline funding. And the beauty of it, because it is long-term, we are changing the buses out at end of life. So the 74 buses that we're buying next year are replacement buses that have reached their end of their 15-year life cycle. And to the credit of CIB and Infrastructure Canada, they've taken the long view on this massive transformation. And so we're not ending the life of these vehicles any sooner. And they're sold to aftermarket either for disposal, or in some cases people buy them and refurbish them and so forth. But in terms of end of life and the asset, it's reached its end of life for the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. On va maintenant à Julien Paquette avec le droit.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, je ne sais pas si la question est pour Mme McKenna ou M. Watson. Le programme en tant que tel, je veux m'assurer de bien comprendre comment il fonctionne. La Ville d'Ottawa va pouvoir remplacer sa flotte au complet. Est-ce que c'est essentiellement parce que la Ville l'a demandé, ou si une autre ville souhaitait faire la même chose, est-ce que l'argent est disponible?
Alors, merci beaucoup pour la question. Alors, moi, je veux que tous les villes regardent ce qui a fait la Ville d'Ottawa. Alors, j'ai annoncé avec le premier ministre 2,75 milliards de dollars pour des autobus zéro émission. La Banque d'infrastructure, dans leur plan de croissance, a fait des investissements dans des autobus électriques et l'infrastructure qui est requise. Alors, ça, c'est vraiment l'opportunité. Comme vous avez entendu, 1 milliard de dollars va être investi dans le long terme pour les autobus électriques ici à Ottawa. Et c'est comment on regarde, on doit faire les choses différemment. Alors ça, on regarde le financement, on regarde nos investissements comme gouvernement, parce que comme j'ai dit, les émissions de gaz à effet de serre dans le secteur des transports, c'est 25 %, bien, c'est presque un quart, presque 25 %. Alors, on doit trouver des solutions. Ça, c'est des solutions qui sont faites au Canada. Alors, c'est des opportunités d'emploi dans un temps où on a besoin d'emploi, et c'est bon pour les gens. Alors, ça veut dire l'air qui va être plus pur. Ça veut dire des gens qui n'ont pas accès à d'autres opportunités pour aller d'un endroit à l'autre, pour avoir des autobus. Et je sais, on a beaucoup de gens ici. Je vois des gens qui travaillent comme conducteurs d'autobus. Et je sais les gens qui ont utilisé des autobus électriques. C'est quelque chose d'extraordinaire parce que c'est silencieux et ça va très bien. Alors, ça, c'est comment on regarde les choses, mais moi, je veux que les autres villes regardent ce qu'on fait ici à Ottawa, et un grand merci à le maire d'Ottawa pour voir l'opportunité avec la banque voir l'opportunité avec le gouvernement du Canada parce qu'on peut faire ça. Mais ce n'est pas facile et chaque journée, on doit travailler fort pour regarder c'est quoi les opportunités pour attaquer au changement climatique.
Merci. Ma deuxième question serait pour M. le maire. La Ville, le conseil municipal a adopté il y a un peu moins d'un an et demi une situation d'urgence en matière de changement climatique. On s'est engagé à éliminer l'ensemble des émissions de gaz à effet de serre dans un avenir quand même assez rapproché. Est-ce qu'à ce moment-là, vous attendiez à être capable de livrer une flotte complète d'autobus électriques aussi rapidement ou on cherchait encore des solutions? Puis à quel moment vous étiez, dans le fond, convaincu?
Certainement, ça c'est une étape très importante pour nous autres d'accomplir nos buts qui concernent les émissions de GHG. Et ça, c'est aussi une promesse que j'ai donnée pendant la dernière élection. Et Mme McKenna a donné presque la même promesse à le niveau fédéral de fournir des fonds pour aider avec la conversion de nos bus diesel à électriques. Alors, si le gouvernement n'était pas ici pour aider avec cette annonce aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment plus difficile pour nous autres de comment est-ce qu'on dit, achieve notre but pour la ville d'Ottawa. I should also mention, I gave you a wrong date. With this plan, we hope to be fully switched over to electric bus by 2036. I mentioned 2040, but it's 2036. Alors, notre but est pour tous les autobus ici à Ottawa, qui étaient les autobus électriques par l'année 2036. Merci.
Merci. We will now go to Aidan Helmer with the Ottawa Citizen.
Good morning. You mentioned the 15-year life cycle of the current diesel buses. Wondering if you have any information on the life cycle or anticipated life cycle of the electric 40-foots.
It's anticipated to be the same or even better.
Okay, and as a follow-up, this was mentioned as a job creation initiative. Can you talk a bit about where the buses will be purchased from and whether they will be all 40-foots? Will they be double-deckers, articulated?
So on who's going to provide the buses, there'll be a tender, but we have great Canadian manufacturers, as Minister McKenna mentioned in her opening remarks. Nova Bus, we've got MCI, who actually just acquired Alexander Dennis a few years ago and are launching a double-decker pilot in California, which I can tell you they may be popping into Ottawa as a bit of a demo this summer. In terms of job creation, the beauty of the CIB deal is that it also covers transition costs. So retooling, fit up, there's work going on right now in our garage for the pilot buses and so forth. So there's job creation on building of the buses, maintaining of the buses, and our operating staff will always be there to operate them.
Thank you. On va maintenant à Antoine Trépanier avec Radio-Canada.
Merci beaucoup. Ma question est pour à la fois Mme McKenna et M. Watson. Évidemment, à Ottawa, il y a une espèce de portfolio en offre de transport en commun. Il y a le train léger, il y a les autobus, peut-être éventuellement l'harmonisation avec le tramway de Gatineau, peut-être. J'aimerais savoir, l'annonce que vous faites aujourd'hui, où est-ce qu'elle se situe en termes d'importance dans ce portfolio-là et pourquoi elle est si importante au moment où on se parle en ce moment?
Merci Antoine. Vous avez une bonne question. Certainement, c'est vraiment important pour nous autres de fournir des autobus électriques parce que maintenant on avait un système de train léger électrique. Alors c'est un peu bizarre si on avait des autobus qui utilisent le diesel pour arriver à une station de gare pour le train léger en électrique. Alors, comme j'ai dit, ça c'est une promesse que j'ai donnée pendant la dernière élection de commencer un programme pour des autobus électriques. Et c'est la même chose que Mme McKenna et le Premier ministre, M. Trudeau, a annoncé il y a quelques semaines un projet pour aider les municipalités parce que nous ne sommes pas capables de fournir tout l'argent pour ce changement important et historique. Alors, vous avez raison. Par exemple, on avait des projets avec Hydro-Ottawa pour les autos électriques, des stations pour changer des autos électriques. On avait un système de train léger électrique. Et nous avons un partenariat qui est très important, Hydro-Ottawa. Et Hydro-Ottawa est un membre de la famille de la Ville d'Ottawa. Alors, ça, c'est vraiment la chose correcte de faire. Ça, c'est un investissement très important pour l'environnement, mais aussi pour la santé de la public et pour notre économie. Madame?
Alors, je dirais les villes extraordinaires ont du transport en commun extraordinaire. On doit faire tout. Alors, nous savons que les émissions de gaz à effet de serre sont, bien, comme j'ai dit, presque un quart de nos émissions. Et le transport en commun est extrêmement important. Mais comment ça marche? C'est pas seulement un autobus électrique, c'est pas seulement le train léger, c'est pas seulement bien le tramway de Gatineau. Moi, je suis vraiment intéressée dans ce projet aussi. C'est pas seulement des pistes cyclables et le transport actif, c'est l'ensemble. Alors, on doit attaquer tout et ça doit être une option irrésistible pour les gens. On doit regarder, les gens habitent tout autour, dans Ottawa, dans le centre de ville, dans les alentours. À Gatineau, on travaille des deux côtés de la rivière des Outaouais. Alors, on doit avoir des solutions qui travaillent ensemble. Ça, c'est un exemple très important parce que tout doit être électrique ou bien sans émission. Alors, les pistes cyclables font partie aussi, le train léger. Alors, moi, je suis très heureuse de voir l'ambition du Ville d'Ottawa et nous sommes là pour supporter les municipalités avec la Banque d'infrastructure, avoir des solutions novatrices qui vont vraiment faire que Ottawa est, comme j'ai dit, la capitale la plus verte le plus vert dans le monde, mais aussi un capitale où le transport en commun est extraordinaire parce que vraiment, les gens veulent vivre, ils veulent travailler, ils veulent venir voir les villes qui ont du bon transport en commun.
Merci beaucoup. Ma deuxième question est pour M. le maire. C'est pour un collègue et ça fait référence un peu à la météo qu'on a aujourd'hui. Il semble faire beau là où vous êtes. La Ville a annoncé des centres de rafraîchissement, du moins pour la population qui en avait besoin. Qu'est-ce que la Ville est prête à faire davantage pour aider les gens qui ont besoin de ces endroits à l'ombre et en temps de pandémie?
Oui, merci Antoine pour la question. Aujourd'hui, la Ville va ouvrir 4 centres pour aider avec le show ici à Ottawa pour les prochains quelques jours. C'est toute l'information sur le site de web ottawa.ca, mais je sais qu'il y a un centre comment on se dit, dans l'Est, dans l'Ouest, et dans le centre et dans le Sud. Comme j'ai dit, tous les détails spécifiques sont sur le site de web. Ça, c'est une recommandation de santé publique. Et nous fournir des chambres dans ces centres communautaires avec l'air climatisation et de l'eau et une place pour rester. Merci.
Merci. On va maintenant à Kenza Beladi avec TVA Gatineau. Kenza, êtes-vous là? Non? D'abord, c'est tout le temps qu'on a aujourd'hui. This is all the time we have. Thank you everyone for your time today.